Hi, welcome to the HVP's third edition of Behind the Music. I'm Stephen Lamarca, Managing Director of the Bardavon and General Manager of the HVP. And today's program is talking about our next concert that'll be happening at the Bardavon on Saturday, March 5th. That was originally scheduled as a celebration of the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, but due to COVID, that concert had to be canceled. We resurrected the program to celebrate women composers, and this program features works by Julia Wolfe, Nkeiru Okoye, and Florence Price. Julia Wolfe won a Pulitzer Prize for her work Anthracite Fields, which is a piece about the coal mining country of Pennsylvania where she grew up. And we're going to be performing movement number 4, which is called Flowers, and it's a piece of the overall movement that talks about women's reaction to what was happening in their town, the drab gray of the coal mining town, that these women planted gardens to brighten the town and to brighten their futures. And then ironically, those flowers were used to mark the graves of the men who passed away working in the mines. It's a really beautiful, haunting piece that features Capella Festiva and an all-female choir led by Christine Howlett, and it's a really beautiful work, and it's really exciting that we're going to get to present some of that on this program. Here's Julia Wolfe talking a little bit about how she created Anthracite Fields.
Born in Pennsylvania, in a small town, and just grew up in the Philadelphia area. As a teenager, young adult, I did a lot of playwriting, poetry writing, and that was where I would say my strength. And so in a way, I think I came through to music from storytelling, writing with words. And I think in a lot of ways it informs my music, this kind of idea that there's not necessarily a narrative, but some kind of gestalt or image or extra musical idea in almost every piece I've written. And yeah, so I guess I'm a storyteller with music.
She's written a lot of instrumental music, a lot of string music, and music that is, I would say, hard-edged and a little bit rock and roll, driving rhythms, and not the style that one usually associates with chorus.
There's a certain part of me that thinks if you're going to say something, say something. And a lot of times people will meet me and they say, well, you seem sort of chill. Doesn't seem like you would write that piece. I almost always am thinking about the physical effort or the kind of movement involved in what it takes to make sound. I've been working in particular on these narrative or somewhat narrative pieces, musical pieces that take a look at the American worker in different contexts. Well, the piece is called Anthracite Fields. Anthracite Fields is the landmass in this area of Pennsylvania that's close to where I'm from, about an hour north of Philadelphia. And to go into the city, which is of course the exciting thing to do, you would drive down a small country road and then you get to Route 309 and you would head south. But if you took 309 and you headed north, which I almost never did, you would wind up in this region. So once I thought of that area, I started to read about it. And what's interesting about it to me too is there's this history that's there. And so I thought, well, what is this history? I don't know anything about it. We went down to the mines, which was fantastic. They take you down and you go, pretty deep, several hundred feet down, I think. And it's beautiful. It's this black, shiny stuff that's in the earth. It's just walls and walls and tunnels that are incredible looking.
Foreman on the same level. This was the second level down, not like an open level like this. It was the next level down, which is really closed in. He was standing on the side and the engine came through, jumped the rails, pinned him against the wall, and he slowly boiled to death. They couldn't move the engine, they couldn't pull him away. and he cooked to death. And by the
There
way,
are millions of stories, like lots of people, lots of issues. So it was a little overwhelming at first, but the thing that caught my interest immediately were the oral histories. So a lot of the books written were, first-person accounts of what life was like. But I had to make choices, so I started to just find these threads that were interesting to me. And those threads became movements. I found this index list of names of all of the names of people who were in mining accidents in this region in Pennsylvania. The list is horrifying. I mean, it's a really long list, lots and lots of names. So I just narrowed it down to the Johns with one-syllable names, because it's very stark and very simple to sing. If you're singing just like John Ash, John Ayers, John Bates, John Bain, John Parr, John So I combined the list of those names with some of the language used to describe how coal is formed. So this kind of idea of foundation, that these men were the foundation, and then that there was an actual physical geological foundation. It's kind of poetic phrases like the briny seas rose and fell, thick roots and branches buried deep in the earth. People persevered and made a life and worked hard, and it's fueled the nation. I mean, this anthracite coal fueled the nation. And who are these people?
I just want to welcome everyone, and particularly wanted to welcome our guest conductor for our next concert coming up on March 5th, Dr. Ann Lundy. Welcome, Ann. It's really nice to finally meet you in person on Zoom.
Great. Nice to meet you too.
You hail from Houston. You've called Houston, Texas home. You were born there. You really kind of discovered your love of classical music as a child, playing piano and violin at a very young age. And I'm curious, what captivated you as a child about classical music and set in motion the idea of becoming a conductor and leading an orchestra, especially at a time when that wasn't really a typical female role, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely. Well, I was inspired. I do have an older sister who grew up playing the piano and flute. And as a younger sibling, of course, anything she did, I wanted to do. So, trailing behind my younger sister, my older sister. So they had a violin, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll play the violin, that kind of thing. But the thing about me and conducting, it's kind of an odd situation, was that even as a little girl, I got a chance to wave my hands around in front of some kind of kids ensemble. The memories are a little fuzzy, but I just fell in love with it. I was like, wow, I wave my hands and then people play and people make noise. Oh man, this is fun. This is fun. I mean, for a little kid. I was one of those people, if it's fun, I like it. If it's not fun, I don't like it. I mean, it was really very basic for me as a child. And I think I was too young to realize that was a role that pretty much a little, hate to say it, but a little Black girl way back then didn't really get into. I was so young that I fell in love with the concept that it just kind of stayed with me.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. And that passion as a child sticks with you and clearly stuck with you.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Oh, yes.
When you were in graduate school, you were a founding member of the William Grant Still String Quartet. And
Yes.
I've heard you referred to him as the Jackie Robinson of classical music.
Yes.
He was kind of a groundbreaking guy. He was the first African-American to conduct the major American symphony orchestra. He was the first to have one of his symphonies conducted or performed by a major symphony orchestra, as well as one of his operas. So it's really groundbreaking.
Yes.
And while he broke many barriers in his time. It took quite a few years later, in 1989, 50 years after he had done it, for you to break ground in your hometown of Houston, conducting the Houston Symphony Orchestra, which I imagine after, all of that you went through as a child growing up there, and, that must have just been such a powerful moment for you to be able to do that there in your hometown, where you developed your whole love of music to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, well, what happened was that at that point, I had my master's in conducting, and I'd been anybody that gave me a chance to do any conducting, I just ran there. Any group, any band, choir, orchestra, didn't matter to me. I just wanted to conduct. And as you were saying, I started the string quartet in grad school at University of Houston, and I started finding out that there was more and more music. So that's the thing about it. I would really, really, really like for our music programs to begin to seriously become multicultural. They use these terms, and it's nice terminology and so forth, but I learned nothing about William Grant Still or Florence Price or Margaret Bonds or all these other, great Black composers. And so I just started learning about them. And one of the composers I learned about was William Dawson. And that had to do with me in the Houston Symphony. When I realized that it was in 1989, they would be celebrating, he was still alive at that point. They would be celebrating his 90th birth year or whatever. And I just got really excited. So I said, well, I think, because again, his piece, the Nkeiru Symphony, had been performed, but it hadn't really been performed in Houston. So that's when I approached the Houston Symphony and I asked, don't you think we should celebrate this wonderful composer? And they were like, well, perhaps blah, blah, blah. And I think I should conduct it. They were like, at that time, I was really unknown. And I was a Black woman from the South.
Yeah, that's
let's face it.
Yeah.
Pretty much conducting is kind of like European white male with the funny sounding name type of deal. I mean, that's just how it's been in the past.
Yeah.
But fortunately, they were interested. And then we did our joint concert together out at Mill Outdoor Theater, which is our big outdoor theater. And one of the things that I like to always tell people is that it's not just about me conducting. It's always about more Black instrumentalists in the world of orchestra. That is my main passion. How do we really change that? And it's a tough cookie. I'm not saying this is easy, but this is my way of addressing it. I have a community orchestra, the Scott Joplin Chamber Orchestra. It's here in Houston, and we specialize in performing music written by Black composers. And when we can, we'll hook up with some other ensembles or whatever, or we simply perform our own works. And I just really feel so passionately that if you work really hard at it, you can start to make some changes in the world of orchestra, because I love orchestra. I love playing the violin and the viola. I just love it. But I feel like if you don't actually do something about changing the makeup of the orchestra, then it will continue to exclude the African American community. And that's just not where we should be at this time.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of talk about that with the whole notion of auditioning behind screens. That at the time when they did that, they said a lot of women were kind of segregated against and weren't really encouraged to be part of the orchestra. And I think that in that way, it did probably open it up that a lot more women are in orchestras now. But I think you're right. There's not a lot of diversity in many orchestras, and that's something that definitely should be addressed and continue to work toward, for sure.
And as I said again, it's not easy. I'm not saying I can snap my fingers and everything will be fine. It's tough, but I'm one of those persons like, okay, that means it's tough. So that means we start working at it. I mean, we start actively addressing it. We don't just say, oh, it's a tough problem, I don't know how to fix it. It's like, okay, it's tough. What can we do? What are the things that we can do beyond just, hate to say it, but just playing a concert at a Black church or whatever? What else can we do beyond that? Because, we need to be thinking outside the box on this. I really feel that way.
I agree, for sure. And the Joplin Chamber Orchestra, as you said, that was one of your founding goals with that. And they were also, they performed with you with the Houston Symphony as well. That was part of that.
Yes.
As well.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yes, and it was really interesting because I remember that some of our players, they were noticing that the Houston Symphony people, now I know it's a community orchestra, so it's obvious that there's a difference in our skill level. But we had rehearsed it more. And when they came to the first rehearsal, she said something like they were marking parts and marking off parts to try to do the funny counting and stuff like that. And one of my players said, "Hey man, they're just like us. You know, they're trying to figure out the counting and those accidentals and those kinds of funny things. Sometimes we think there's this ocean between our communities when in fact we're musicians, you know, not the fact that yes, they're at a higher level and they have studied music in ways that, you know, perhaps all of my people have not, but it still comes down to trying to get those funny rhythms and those, was this accidental, is that still in this measure too, and those kind of musical things that musicians, you know, we figure out.
It's a common language, yeah, for sure.
It's a common language.
You've also been a champion, besides for Black performers or performers of color, for doing works by composers and really getting them in front of audiences as well. And one of our featured composers on this program is Nkeiru Okoye, who's we're going to be premiering some arias from her work, a really powerful work, the Songs of Harriet Tubman, which we've talked about for a while, doing with her. And it had been scheduled prior to the pandemic, and then we had to cancel the concert. And so we're getting a chance to do that now. And coincidentally, it's being performed on the right around the period of the 250th birthday of Harriet Tubman, which is kind of cool that by chance that just kind of happened. But have you ever done any? Yeah, it's cool. Have you ever done any of Okoye's work? Have you?
No, I haven't.
Do you have any thoughts about the piece? Having, you know?
Oh, I'm really excited. I am really excited. I've never done any of her works. I've heard of her name, but I've never performed any of her works. And I am really excited about performing this. This piece is just, I mean, these 4 excerpts, which is what we're performing, these 4 excerpts are just such powerful storytelling. And I'm one of those persons that, you know, I know music is an intrinsic and blah, blah, blah. But to me, storytelling, because I was a kid, grew up watching Leonard Bernstein tell stories about the orchestra pieces. And I thought it was so magical. And I think sometimes we need to bring that back in. But as this piece, it tells the story of Harriet Tubman as she changes from a girl trying to figure things out to a young woman, to a mature woman, and then to her claiming her right as Moses of saying, yes, it's going to be hard. You're going to get hungry. You're going to get scared or whatever, but we are proceeding forward. You will be free. It will be tough, but you will proceed that. And it's just so inspiring. I admire her work so much.
Yes. Yeah. Well, she's been a friend for a while. And as I said, we've been trying to program this. So I'm really happy to be able to finally be presenting it to the audience. And we're going to cut away for a moment that we have Nkeiru talking about the creation of the Songs of Harriet Tubman. So here's Nkeiru Okoye talking about her work.
Well, Songs of Harriet Tubman is what's called a song cycle. And a song cycle, as I tell my music appreciation students, is a collection of songs based on a common theme. And in this case, the common theme is Harriet Tubman. The cycle starts off with young Harriet Tubman. Her given name is Araminta Ross, and she's going off to work for the first time. She's 7, and they're sending her away from her plantation. And that's the only home she knows, and they're sending her away from her mom and her brothers and her sister. And so she's very, very concerned. And then with the second song, it's called My Name is Harriet Now, and this is her coming of age song. She's about 10 years older, and she's gone through some significant trials and some tribulations. She's been injured very badly. She's had a head injury, and she doesn't want to be called a child anymore. And Araminta she refers to as a name of her youth. So she changes her name to Harriet. The third song in there is I Am Harriet Tubman, Free Woman. And this it seems to be everyone's favorite song in the cycle. It's the gospel aria, because each one has a different style of African American music in there. And the first one sounds a lot like spirituals. It's not based on spirituals, but it's got that flavor. The second one is all about jazz, and you hear all different styles of jazz, old school, new stuff that's way out there. And then it kind of ends with smooth jazz. So you can just imagine yourself in a coffee bar someplace just listening, you know. But the third one is the gospel aria, and she's in the opera, she's actually in a black church. And I cheat a little bit because gospel hadn't been invented yet. But she gets out and she says, "I am Harriet Tubman and I am a free woman." And she's just liberated and she just does her thing. And then with the last aria, she says, "I am Moses the Liberator." And that's the kind of conceptual. And she says, "I'll hold my revolver between the space between your eyes. You keep on going or die." And it's one of these Tubman quotes that I don't think anyone ever forgets. Well, I have been working on Harriet Tubman for a good bit. I was living in Maryland when I started the project. I wanted to do something about a black woman, and I was looking at Sojourner Truth or Harriet Tubman. And reading the biographies, I found out that Tubman started out in Maryland, and since I was in Maryland, it seemed like a natural thing to do. Little did I know what was going to happen, which was that I was going to write this very simple piece about Harriet Tubman, the type of thing that pretty much has been written before several times, just a bunch of spirituals that end up with "Go Down Moses." And it's been done so many times that I figured, why do that? Do something more substantial. And so I really began to research Tubman, and fortunately there were about 3 biographers who had decided to do substantive biographies on Tubman at the time. And so I started working with them, and I decided that my unique take on Tubman would be to first do something that just talks about the real reason that she would go up and down the Northeast Corridor, risking her life and risking her freedom. And I thought that makes a very interesting story. The second thing I wanted to do with it was to really reflect her music. Because a lot of times, you know, when people think about opera, they have kind of this knee-jerk reaction, "Ooh, I don't like opera." I wanted this to be the type of thing that you could listen to it and hear a lot of folk music in it, because Harriet Tubman would not have been singing bel canto opera, which is, you know, what we think of when we hear the term opera. She would have been singing spirituals, she would have been singing work songs. Ragtime was just sort of kind of getting into the mix at that point. And I wanted it to reflect the music of her time. I think after any program, any kind of concert, you want people to go away with a satisfying concert experience. You want them to say, "Wow, musically I feel good about what I just heard." I want them to feel a little challenged, because you're going to hear some music that, like I said, it's a little out there and it's going to challenge you a bit. When I think about what I want to say to the next generation of composers, or even my contemporaries, people who want to get any piece of music out there, the first thing is write it. You know, go to school, make sure that you have those skills. Don't just assume just because we're in this digital society that we can go out and we've got these tools that make it easier, but the hard work is still there.
So we're back with Ann Lundy. And as we discussed earlier, Ann, you've been one to really seek out the music of different composers. And you mentioned earlier Florence Price, who is a composer who, she was the first African-American woman to have her work performed by a major orchestra, the Chicago Symphony. And then she sort of slowly just sort of faded out a little bit. And, you know, again, in a time when composers were mostly male and were largely white males. So it's not entirely surprising that that happened, but her work really kind of disappeared until just by chance, an abandoned house that she used to live in, they found a whole treasure trove of her work that sort of sparked a little revival. And I found that just really fascinating, that someone that, you know, broke ground in the way that she did just almost faded out and was not really known. And it's one of the first pieces of hers that we're doing. It's the first major work we're doing of hers, which I'm very excited about. We're doing Symphony Number 1. And I'm just wondering, have you had a chance to conduct a lot of her work, and what impact, if any, did she have on you? And if you have thoughts just in general about her impact among women in color composers in classical music, just I'm curious because I don't really know what her reach has been, because she's fairly new to me, and I know a lot of people that's probably not true, but I was one of the people who really discovered her recently, honestly. So,
Well, she was, of course, an inspiration. And I have conducted parts of this symphony before. It's been a few years. Excuse me. For me, this is a lifelong journey regarding finding music by Black composers. And for me, it was as I found out about her works and started just rumbling around and finding out that she was a prolific composer. I know that she's being rediscovered now, but she completed 4 symphonies. She completed opera. She was an organist and pianist initially. She completed numerous pieces for organ and piano and other orchestra pieces and concertos. And she was a prolific composer, at least 300 pieces. So the fact that she's being rediscovered now is very good, but I don't want people thinking she wrote this piece and then just kind of fell off the wire. She continued to try throughout her lifetime to get other orchestras, to get other professional ensembles to perform her music. She, of course, ran into issues of racism and sexism as a woman of color, but that didn't stop her from creating beautiful music. So again, I'm really pleased to be performing. That's why I'm so glad you guys invited me up here to perform the entire work. As I said, I've done parts of it before, but to do the entire work here is so thrilling to me. I'm so looking forward to it. And I really hope the audience will enjoy it, because she was a fascinating woman. If you get a chance to read more about it, you might want to, look her up online and those kinds of things. A colleague wrote a beautiful book called The Heart of a Woman, with more information about her life. She was a Black woman who grew up in the church, and like I said, piano and organ were her initial things, but she started playing other things. And I don't know, her life is just a fascinating story. And it's one that was not perfect. She was involved in her first marriage was an abusive one, and she left, and she had to figure out ways to navigate herself as a single mother at that point in this crazy world and still make ends meet. And that's one of the reasons why she composed so much music, because she had to keep churning out music, especially piano works, to keep her family afloat. So there are a lot of things about her life story that a lot of people can relate to. Sometimes I think we think that classical music is so high and, these people have such grand lives, when in fact, some of them, had real struggles.
Yeah, for sure. And she had some really beautiful piano music. You mentioned that specifically. She really did some pieces that I've been, as I've come to know more about her, I've been trying to listen to a lot of things that I wasn't familiar with, and just some really beautiful works that.
Absolutely.
Really,
she was a prolific composer, lots and lots of music. So I guarantee you there are things ranging from, kid compose. Let's say you're a music teacher somewhere and you want to expose your students to music of Black composers. There is music that she composed. I don't know specifically where you would look, but there's music that she composed specifically for children, and it would help them, learn the things. And yet she was very much a teacher. So if they were working on a specific piano skill or something like that, it would include those things. So again, great composer, and I'm glad to see her starting to get the recognition she deserves.
I agree. I think it's going to be a real treat for our audience. For some people who might not be as familiar with her, they're going to really, I think they're going to really love this piece of music.
Right. So, I think so too.
Yeah. And what's next for you? What else are you working on that you'd like to share with our audience? Anything exciting on the horizon for you, or what's up?
Well, I'm continuing to conduct here. We have a Black History show coming up in a couple of weeks. So I'm busy getting that together. And then we're going to do, my work is not only in classical, because the next show after that will be a Philly soul sound. We do some of the great hits of the Philadelphia sound. So that's things like Love of Money or whatever, some of those great hits that I grew up with. And I think a lot of people still remember them. So, pop music like that. And then the orchestra will be going up to Dallas and playing a concert there. And we're celebrating, for someone that grew up enjoying the sounds of Whitney Houston. It's been 10 years since she passed. So we're going to do a Whitney Houston remembrance, some of her great songs, I Will Always Love You, and I Want to Dance with Somebody, and, some of her great tunes. So my life is always this odd mixture of what you might call, quote, classical and spirituals and pop and jazz and things like that, because I literally do love music. I just think that, sometimes we kind of put up these barriers between classical and pop, and we shouldn't. I'm like, enjoy the music. What kind of music you like, enjoy it.
Oh, good. Yeah. You speaking of pop, I seem to remember you had a little thing at the Super Bowl with Beyonce. Am I?
That's right. That was her first appearance, and we did the Star Spangled Banner. And it was exciting, a little crazy, a little nerve-wracking. I couldn't believe how much they put you through the security apparatus or whatever. but it was exciting. I mean, she grew up here in Houston, and though we're definitely not, best friends or anything, she used to, a long time ago when she and the little girls had a little group called Girls Time, and people may not remember that, but a long time ago, we had a little space here in town. Our community music center had a space, and all kinds of music groups would come in and just use the space. They would rehearse and, try out things. So it'd be the jazz musicians or blues musicians or pop musicians. And I remember this little bitty girls group called Girls Time practicing at our place and just having a great time. So yeah, it's been fun.
That's cool. Well, Ann, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. I am very much looking forward to meeting you in person and working together on this program, which I think people are going to really love. Again, the program is Saturday, March 5th, and we'll be doing a pre-concert talk at 7 o'clock to talk a little bit more about some of the works on the program. And I very much look forward to seeing you in person.
Great. Look forward to seeing you in person too, and look forward to sharing this beautiful music with your wonderful people here in Poughkeepsie. And this will be a real treat for me because I visited New York. I've never visited Poughkeepsie, and it looks like a beautiful location.
It is a beautiful area. I think you're going to enjoy it. Thanks.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
On a chilly Easter Sunday in 1939, Marian Anderson was invited to sing before a hushed and reverential crowd of 75,000 people in front of the Lincoln Memorial in our nation's capital, while hundreds of thousands more listened on the radio. This electrifying event was a watershed moment in civil rights history, bringing national attention to the country's color barrier as no other event had previously done. And Anderson's final song that day was composed by Little Rock native Florence Price. This was not the only brush with greatness for Florence Price. As a child, her parents welcomed Frederick Douglass into their home. As a young mother, Florence corresponded with W.E.B. Du Bois, and later still she collaborated with writers Langston Hughes, James Wright, and dancer Katherine Dunham. But the pinnacle of her life's work as a musician and composer must have been that night in 1933 when the world-famous Chicago Symphony, consisting entirely of white men, premiered her Symphony in E minor at the Chicago World's Fair. Even today, this would be a huge achievement for any composer, But at that time, it was entirely without precedent that music written by an African American woman would be presented by such a prestigious orchestra in such a prestigious setting. The poet Paul Laurence Dunbar used the metaphor of a caged bird for the oppression of Black Americans. This is the story of a woman who refused to accept the limited aspirations that were expected of her race and gender, who would not be a caged bird. This is the story of Florence B. Price.
I hope you all enjoyed today's program, and I look forward to seeing you all at the March 5th concert. Please join us at 7 p.m. for the pre-concert lecture with Dr. Ann Lundy. We'll see you all there.